America is at a crossroads where two sides are being set at odds against each other. One group wants to tear it all down, burn it up, and then start fresh, a new type of America remade without racism or inequality. The other side is desperately hanging on, trying to retain a sense of nationhood, trying to preserve history in order to learn from it, trying to protect the culture while making necessary changes. And in the meantime, gone are the statues, the names, and the language. Gone is gone with the wind. Television programs and movies that portray police in a positive light, like the Paw Patrol cartoon, those are gone as well. And back to the marketing department go Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, Mrs. Butterworth's, and Cream of Wheat. Even the word antebellum in the name of a country music group has to go. The word simply means before the war, but any reference to the Civil War, any reference to slavery, any reference to the Confederacy is now verboten. Is destruction really the only way to heal our land? Let's take a simple look at Black Lives Matter, at their plan, their foundation, and their process. They're the ones leading the charge. And then you, having the facts, can decide what to think. So why Marxism and why now? On the left, Karl Marx, and on the right, the three beautiful women, the founders of Black Lives Matter. Patrisse Cullors said on CNN in 2015, she's one of the founders, "We are super vested on ideological theories of Marxism. We are trained Marxists." So since Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization, let's take a look at Karl Marx. He wrote the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, the foundation of many regimes in the world today, like Venezuela, China, Cuba, Cambodia, and North Korea. Marx was an atheist who believed capitalism would self-destruct because it depends on the decency of mankind. A group that he belonged to, called the Young Hegelians, helped formulate his personal philosophies. Mr. Hegel said that the divine idea of God was a farce that should be replaced with government. That is a cornerstone for Marxism, as you will soon see. After Marx died came Vladimir Lenin, who said liberty is so precious that it must be rationed. Lenin was a Russian whose older brother was executed for plotting to assassinate the Tsar. Lenin took Marx's idea of revolution and formed the Bolshevik Party. They were all about class warfare and raised up a vicious, cutthroat volunteer army of regular people called the Red Guard to overthrow the government. On November 7th and 8th of 1917, Russia fell to the Bolsheviks, who seized railways and all forms of communications. They controlled telegraph offices and newspapers, and you might say they had their own form of fake news. After 3 years of bloody civil war, the Communist Soviet Union was born. The Bolsheviks practiced segregation and elimination. They created a secret police called the Cheka to exterminate certain segments of society. It's estimated that 100,000 people or more were killed simply because they were of a certain class. This campaign of Red Terror coincided with Great Famine, and by the end of the revolution in 1921, 5 million Russians died of famine and most of the others lived in abject poverty. Here is one example of what happened to people in Ukraine who were on the other side of the class warfare. And I also wanted to show you this. It's from a blog. A man writes, "I was named after my grandfather, who was a murderer, a bloody butcher, and a security officer in the Cheka. Among his victims were his own parents. My grandfather arrested his own father for speculation and had him shot. His mother, my great-grandmother, found out about it and hanged herself." Joseph Stalin was the next one to take over the movement. By the time he took over after Lenin, food scarcity was so common that he decreed the death penalty for any theft of state property. Of course, that included food, since all the farms were owned by the state. Millions of Ukrainians were starving under Stalin's rule, and children who took a few ears of corn out of a collective farm could be shot. Stalin had his own version of mass exterminations called the Great Purge. He executed 750,000 of his own people from 1936 to 1938 and sent millions of others to labor camps in Siberia. Communism has never produced a nation of plenty that Marx promised. Instead, tens of millions of people have died as a result of famine and political violence. Rather than eliminating class, China and Russia, their communist revolutions created small, enormously wealthy elites that profited from the state-owned enterprises. And here you can see Venezuela, which is a mess right now with food scarcity and rolling power outages. But in 1950, before Marxism took root, they were ranked number 4 in the world for GDP per capita. Now, let's meet Marxism in 2020. And I want to start with this quote. Anyone who knows anything of history knows that great social changes are impossible without, wait for it, feminine upheaval. Social progress can be measured exactly by the social position of the fair sex, the ugly ones included. Karl Marx. So here they are, the founders of Black Lives Matter, the females, Patrisse Cullors, Opal Tometi, and Alicia Garza. Black Lives Matter is just 7 years old, but it's transformed from a small but passionate movement into a cultural and political phenomenon that has now broken into the mainstream. Among some, it's more popular than either the Republican or the Democrat Party. Why? Well, first of all, they have passion. Patrisse Cullors said, "We didn't build Black Lives Matter as a policy think tank. We built it as a cultural movement. That's why everybody feels moved by it. It's why it tugs at people's hearts. It's why it pisses people off. It's why people felt like they had to pick a side." And here's an example of passion. This is 15,000 people gathered in Brooklyn, New York for the Black Trans Lives Matter protest. Patrisse also said this is a movement led and envisioned and directed by Black women. Many of us are queer. We're moms, and we really started this work because we wanted to see our children survive. We're laying the groundwork and foundation for a new world, not just for our descendants, but for right now. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. Number 2, they seek to polarize. This is from an op-ed by Miriam Kaba. She's listed on the Black Lives Matter Chicago website. Abolish police? Yes, she said. We mean literally abolish the police. We want a society without individualism and self-preservation. We want those things replaced by cooperation and mutual aid. She also wants to dismantle the prison system. Here's the exact quote. This was in the New York Times. People like me who want to abolish prisons and police, however, have a vision of a different society built on cooperation instead of individualism, on mutual aid instead of self-preservation. When the streets calm and people suggest once again that we hire more Black police officers or create more civilian review boards, I hope that we remember those efforts, all the times those efforts have failed. And let's take a look at the failures. So here are the cities that want to defund the police: Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Denver, Philadelphia, Burlington, Vermont, Boston, New York City, Baltimore, Chicago, and even Nashville. The Minneapolis City Council has already voted to disband their police force, and the Los Angeles City Council is working on something called the People's Budget that reduces the Los Angeles Police Department by 90%. LA Mayor Garcetti also put a moratorium on adding criminals to police gang databases and will cut money from city operations. He wants to take $150 million from the police department, and then he's going to take that money and invest in communities of color. How he's going to do that, well, there's no answer just yet. In the area of polarization, it means not only do you not vote for someone, but you remove them from office and literally destroy them. This is from Patrisse Cullors' interview with CNN. She said President Trump not only needs to not be in office in November, he should resign now. He's not fit for office. Black Lives Matter will push for a move to get Trump out. Our goal is to get Trump out. Here's another example of that same philosophy. This is a tweet from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a representative for New York City, at the U.S. House of Representatives. She said, "It's vital that governors maintain restrictions on businesses until after the November elections because economic recovery will help Trump be reelected. A few business closures or job losses is a small price to pay to be freed from his presidency. Hashtag keep us closed." And she put that out on May 20th of 2020. The third thing to do is go mainstream. Let's take a look at this from their website, Black Lives Matter. As part of our initiative in the fall of 2019, we will bring together a multiracial cadre of leading reporters, columnists, editors, and journalists to collectively envision and produce the first ever racial reporting guidebook, which includes helpful strategies to build anti-racist literacies in time for the 2020 election. What does that exactly mean? I thought journalists were simply supposed to report what is happening and give us the truth. Now we have this from their website, Educational Initiatives. We organize high-profile public events and educational campaigns that put anti-racist change agents in conversation and transform the racial narrative. Well, if you don't know what that means, perhaps this will help explain it. Open Syllabus Project, which tracks school assignments, found in 2016 that Marx's The Communist Manifesto is the third most frequently assigned book at American colleges and universities. And besides that, his conflict theory is already taught everywhere. So just to refresh our memories on what this looks like, the focus is how power structures and power disparities impact people's lives, and the concepts, all societies perpetuate forms of injustice and inequity. Power is unequally divided, and some groups are dominant. Social order is based on control, perpetuated by dominant groups. Social change is driven by conflict, and life is characterized by conflict, not consensus. So how do we bring about the conflict? We create the chaos, and it leads to a deadly revolution, and then the end of it is a different group takes over. This is from The Federalist in 2016, how Black Lives Matter is bringing back traditional Marxism. The writer says, "It isn't surprising that Black Lives Matter is a communist organization, but the type of communism they subscribe to is. They're conservative communists, attempting to fold the progressive movement back into traditional Marxism. BLM has turned its back on intersectional theory, the modern conflict theory that birthed safe spaces, trigger warnings, and the oppression Olympics. Instead, BLM is rebirthing the traditional class structure, reframing it in terms of black and white." So it seems that they've moved into a new realm of theory and practice. Number 4, you always want to silence your opposition. Stalin had books written to flatter himself and had his name incorporated into the Soviet national anthem. He censored photographs to remove those he had executed. He didn't want their pictures left remaining. All media in the Soviet Union was controlled by the state, including television, radio broadcasting, newspaper, magazine, and book publishing. How? The state owned everything, all production facilities, thus making all those employed in media state employees who couldn't put out statements of anything that they thought. They just had to parrot the narrative from the Communist Party. So here we have the New York Times arts section putting this tweet out: "Films will have to meet an inclusion standard to be eligible for the Oscars, according to the Academy. The details are still being worked out. You have to meet the standards or your films won't get awards." And now it seems like they won't even get produced, and they certainly won't make it to any platform. You cannot hold an opposing opinion now in universities either. Professor Gordon Klein, you can ask him, he used to work at UCLA. He made a mockery of students' demand for no-harm finals for blacks who might be traumatized after the death of George Floyd. His classes are all online. So he asked a question: are there any students that may be of mixed parentage, such as half black and half Asian? What do you suggest I do with respect to them? A full concession or just half? Also, do you have any idea if any students are from Minneapolis? I assume that they probably are especially devastated as well. I'm thinking that a white student from there might be possibly even more devastated by this, especially because some might think that they're racist even if they're not. He also wanted to know how to achieve a no-harm outcome, since the only grade is from the final exam. Not only is he gone from UCLA, but now he's under police protection because he's been receiving death threats. The next step is to get funding. This article is from 2016. Major donors consider funding Black Lives Matter. Some of the biggest donors on the left to meet behind closed doors next week in Washington with leaders of Black Lives Matter movement and their allies to discuss funding the protest movement. The meetings are taking place at the annual winter gathering of the Democracy Alliance Major Liberal Donor Club, which runs from Tuesday evening through Saturday morning and is expected to draw Democrat financial heavyweights such as Tom Steyer. Remember, he is the billionaire that ran for president. And then there was this. When you click to donate to Black Lives Matter, it takes you to Act Blue. Now, Act Blue, the question was, this is from their own website, is Act Blue run by the Democrat Party or affiliated with any organizations? It's not run officially by the Democrat Party. They say they're a mission-based organization, which is why only Democrats, not Republicans, can use our tools to fundraise. So if you give to Black Lives Matter and your donated money goes unclaimed, Act Blue disperses the money however they want. These are their top expenditures so far in 2020. You can see these are the Democrat candidates that ran, starting with Bernie, who was given $186 million, and even some Senate candidates are on here as well. And finally, the revolt. I want to take a step back to Mr. Hegel and the Hegelian dialectic, something that was so important to Karl Marx. The chessboard is a well-known symbol, and the black and white squares represent control through duality. So whether it's left or right, white or black, conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican, control is gained through two opposing parties as both parties reach the same destination. And the goal, of course, always is order through guided conflict, or in other words, chaos. A simple diagram here shows you how this works. So you take the agenda, which is, under Marxism, centralization of power under the government and no private ownership. It leads to this thesis. So the thesis could be manufactured terrorist threat, or it could be protests of the death of George Floyd, or racism, or whatever it happens to be. It leads to the antithesis, or the antithesis, repressive police state. Not that it's the police, but it is the government controlling everything. And then to combine these two in a synthesis requires the removal of freedoms, the transfer of power from the many to the few. And that basically is Marxism in a nutshell. So which is it? Is Black Lives Matter a growing group of Marxists who want a revolution by way of destroying safety, the family, private ownership, and America itself, as they've said in their own writings? Or is it what many people believe, a generous, fair, and helpful agency of change who want all people, especially those of color, to have a better life? Is it neither? Is it both? The beauty is you get to decide. And let me leave you with just a couple of things. First, this quote from George Orwell's book, 1984, "Every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street building has been renamed, every date has been altered, and the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History is stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right." And finally, I like to leave things on a good note. This is Psalm 82. And notice that the word gods here just means the leaders of the people. God stands, that would be Almighty God, stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods. How long will you judge unjustly and accept the persons of the wicked? Defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and the needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Rid them out of the hand of the wicked. They know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course. I have said, you are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High, but you shall die like men, and fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God, and judge the earth, for you shall inherit all nations. I leave you with that. I thank you so much for watching. I'm Lori Colley, and I'll see you next time.